The rain had been falling all morning, thin, silver sheets that blurred the mountain road into a river of gray. Clara Ruiz kept both hands tight on the steering wheel, squinting through the windshield. Her old SUV rattled as it climbed the winding bridge that crossed the forest ravine. In the back seat, her daughter Emma hummed to herself, drawing on the fogged window with her finger. "Almost there, Mom?" she asked. "Almost," Clara replied. 10 more minutes and we'll reach the clinic. Try not to hum too loud, it makes me nervous." Emma giggled. "You're always nervous when it rains." "Because I don't trust Oregon roads," Clara said with a half-smile. She worked long hours as a paramedic in a small mountain town, shifts that blurred into each other. Since her husband died 2 years ago, life had been about survival, work, bills, and keeping Emma safe. But this morning felt different. The mist was heavier. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A deep crash, like metal twisting. It came from somewhere below the bridge. Clara slowed the SUV, heart thudding. "Did you hear that?" Emma looked up, eyes wide. "Yeah. Like a car crash." Clara parked at the edge of the bridge and rolled down her window. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the faint echo of something metallic scraping against rock. Then, a groan. A man's voice. Distant, pained. "Mom," Emma whispered. "Someone's down there." Clara hesitated. The smart thing would be to call it in. Wait for rescue. But her instincts, the same instincts that had saved countless people on emergency calls, told her there wasn't time. "Stay in the car," she said, already unbuckling her seatbelt. Emma grabbed her sleeve. "Mom, it's dangerous." Clara met her eyes. "Lock the doors and don't move. Understand?" Emma nodded, clutching her stuffed fox tightly. Clara stepped out into the rain. Her boots splashed in puddles as she crossed to the railing. The drop beneath was steep, at least 30 feet to the rocky ground below. Through the mist, she saw the wreckage of a black motorcycle tangled in the metal supports under the bridge. And beside it, lying half-submerged in the stream, was a man. He wasn't moving. Clara's pulse spiked. "Oh my God." She grabbed her emergency kit from the back of the SUV, looped a rope around the guardrail, and began her descent. The rope burned her palms, but she barely noticed. The man's face came into view first, pale beneath streaks of blood and rain. His dark hair clung to his forehead. His body was twisted awkwardly, one arm handcuffed to a steel beam, the other pressed weakly against his ribs. His black jacket was torn, revealing a deep wound in his side. Clara splashed through the shallow water toward him. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. He turned his head slightly, eyes focusing on her. They were startling icy blue and filled with disbelief. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "You're hurt," she said quickly, kneeling beside him. "I'm a paramedic. I can help." He coughed, grimacing. "They'll come back." "Who?" she asked, already pulling out gauze. "Doesn't matter." His gaze locked on hers. "If they see you, you're dead too." Clara ignored the warning and tore open her first aid kit. "Let's get that bleeding under control first." "What's your name?" He didn't answer. His breathing was shallow, uneven. She reached for his side, where the wound bled steadily through soaked fabric. "I need to cut your jacket off." He winced but didn't protest. She cut through the material with trembling hands, revealing a bullet wound high on his ribs, clean entry, but dangerous if not treated soon. "You've been shot," she said. "If I don't stop the bleeding, you'll die. Better than getting caught again." Clara frowned. "You talk like you're a criminal." His lips curved faintly. "Maybe I am." A sharp gust of wind rattled the bridge above. Somewhere in the distance, an engine roared. Clara froze, glancing up the ravine. The man's eyes snapped open. "They're coming." "Who?" she whispered. "The men who did this." He struggled weakly against the handcuff. "Please, get me out before they find me." Clara's heart pounded. She could hear the echo of multiple engines, now vehicles, fast and heavy. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't random. She grabbed a wrench from her kit and attacked the handcuff chain. It took every ounce of strength, but the metal finally snapped. The man collapsed forward into her arms, heavy and limp. "Come on," she muttered, hoisting him up. "I've got you." He hissed in pain. "Why are you helping me?" "Because that's what I do. Even when it could kill you." She gave a strained smile. "Especially then." With his arms slung over her shoulders, she dragged him through the shallow stream to the rope. His blood was warm against her skin. Above, headlights cut through the fog. Men shouted. "Move," she told herself, adrenaline surging. She used every muscle in her body to pull him upward, inch by inch. When they reached the top, Emma was out of the car, crying. "Mom! Get back inside!" Clara yelled. "Start the engine." The girl obeyed without question. Clara half carried, half dragged the stranger to the SUV, shoving him into the back seat. His face was white as chalk. "Stay awake," she ordered. He blinked at her, voice barely audible. "Name's Nikolai." "Okay, Nikolai. You're going to live." She jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and floored the gas. The SUV fishtailed on the wet road before gaining traction. Behind them, black trucks emerged from the fog. Emma cried out. "They're following us." "I see them," Clara said, gripping the wheel. "Hold on." Bullets struck the asphalt behind them, sparks flying. She swerved down a dirt turnoff she knew led toward the old logging road. Her headlights cut through the mist like knives. "Left." Nikolai rasped weakly. "There's a fork ahead, take left." Clara didn't question how he knew. She turned hard. The SUV bounced violently, throwing Emma against her seatbelt. When she finally lost the pursuers, Clara didn't stop until they reached the edge of a small abandoned ranger station. She parked behind a fallen tree and turned to face him. "You need a hospital." "No hospitals," he muttered. "They'll find me." "Then what?" she demanded. "You want me to let you bleed out?" He met her eyes with faint amusement. "You're stubborn." "You're bleeding on my seats," she snapped. "That's all the reason I need." He gave a small, pained laugh that turned into a cough. "Then let's make it worth the mess." And just like that, without realizing it, Clara Ruiz had crossed a line she could never uncross. The rain hadn't stopped. It followed them all the way back to Clara's cabin on the edge of town, a modest two-bedroom house surrounded by pine trees and silence. Emma carried the first aid box inside while Clara and Nikolai stumbled through the doorway. His steps were uneven, his breath ragged. "Put him on the table," Clara said, clearing space with one arm sweep. Emma hesitated. "Mom, who is he?" "Someone who needs help," Clara replied firmly. "That's all you need to know right now." Nikolai collapsed onto the wooden table with a groan. "Nice place," he murmured. "A little cozy for emergency surgery." "Don't pass out," Clara warned. "I need you awake." She tossed her soaked jacket aside, scrubbed her hands with alcohol, and gathered supplies, gauze, antiseptic, her emergency suture kit. Emma hovered near the doorway. "Should I call 911? "No." Nikolai's voice was sharp despite the weakness. Clara shot him a glare. "She's not calling anyone, but you better start talking." "Who are you running from?" He closed his eyes. "People I used to work for." "What kind of work?" "The kind that pays in blood." Clara stared at him. "You're not making me feel better." "Didn't think I would," he muttered. The wound was deep but clean. She sterilized the area and pressed gauze hard against it. He hissed but didn't pull away. "This will hurt," she said. "I've been hurt before." She began stitching, quick and precise. His jaw clenched, every muscle trembling, but he didn't make a sound. Emma, wide-eyed, handed her tools silently when asked. When the final suture was tied, Clara leaned back, breathless. "There. You're lucky the bullet missed anything vital." He looked up at her through half-lidded eyes. "Lucky's not usually my thing." Emma spoke softly. "Mom, is he a bad guy?" Clara froze, wiping blood from her hands. She didn't know how to answer. Nikolai gave a faint smile. "Depends who you ask." Emma frowned. "Are bad people still people?" He blinked, surprised by the question. "Yeah. Sometimes more than the good ones." Clara shot him a look. "Don't confuse her." "I'm not," he said simply. She's smarter than you think. Clara sighed, exhausted. You need rest. I'll get blankets. When she returned, Nikolai was half asleep. His breathing had steadied, but his hand twitched toward an invisible weapon even in sleep. She spread a blanket over him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Emma stood beside her, whispering, "Mom, are we safe?" "Yes," Clara lied. "He won't hurt us." But later that night, when thunder rolled across the mountains, Clara sat by the window, unable to rest. Every time lightning flashed, she saw the men on the bridge, the trucks, the guns. She whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Behind her, Nikolai stirred. "You saved me," he said quietly. Clara jumped. "You're awake. Can't sleep." Pain meds wore off. He sat up slowly, wincing. "You risked everything for me." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I couldn't leave you there. You didn't even know who I was." "Maybe I didn't want to." He studied her in the dim light. "You're not like most people. That's what my boss says every time I break protocol." He smiled faintly. "You'll regret helping me." "Maybe," she said, meeting his gaze. "But I'd regret not helping you even more." Silence stretched between them. Outside, rain tapped against the glass. Finally, Nikolai spoke again, voice low. "They'll come for me and for you now. You need to take your daughter and leave before dawn." Clara crossed her arms. "And go where?" "I have a job, a house, a life." "Not anymore," he said simply. "They saw your face." Fear crawled up her spine. "You're serious?" He nodded once. "Dead serious." She turned away, running a hand through her hair. "So what do we do?" He looked at her with that calm, unnerving composure. "We survive. But you'll have to trust me." "Trust," she echoed. "You're a stranger who bleeds on my floor and tells me assassins are coming." "Yes," he said, grimacing as he stood. "And that stranger is your only chance of staying alive." Before Clara could reply, headlights swept across her front window, bright, sudden, and too close. Her heart lurched. "Get down," Nikolai hissed, grabbing her arm. They ducked as gunfire shattered the window. Emma screamed from the hallway. Clara bolted toward her, instincts taking over. She scooped her daughter into her arms as Nikolai staggered to the wall, pulling a small knife from his boot. "Back door," he barked. They ran through the kitchen and out into the rain. The forest loomed ahead, dark and endless. Clara hesitated only a second before plunging into it. Branches slapped her face. Mud sucked at her shoes. Behind them, gunfire echoed again, followed by Nikolai's strained breathing as he stumbled beside her. Emma clung to her neck. "Mom, what's happening?" Clara's voice shook. "It's okay, baby. Just hold on tight." When they finally stopped, miles from the house, Nikolai leaned against a tree, breathing hard. "They'll burn it," he said. "They always do." Clara looked at him, chest heaving. "Then what?" He turned to her, rain streaking his face. "Then we disappear." "Disappear where?" "To people who owe me favors. A safe place." Clara stared at him, trembling. "You're asking me to trust a man I found bleeding under a bridge." "Yes," he said simply. "Because you already did." The forest around them was silent except for rain and the faint crackle of distant flames. Clara realized he was right, there was no going back. She met his gaze, eyes hard. "If I'm doing this, I need the truth." "Who are you really?" He hesitated, then answered quietly, "My name is Nikolai Vale. I used to kill people for a living. Now the people I worked for want me dead." Clara's stomach turned cold. "An assassin." He gave a single, weary nod. "And I just saved your life." "You did," he said, almost gently. "And that means they'll come for you too." Clara took Emma's hand and straightened. Her fear hardened into resolve. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Nikolai stared at her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You might actually survive this." She glared at him. "I'm not doing this for you." "I know," he said softly. "That's what makes you dangerous." The three of them stood beneath the pines as dawn began to break through the clouds, cold light spilling over their faces. Behind them, Smoke rose from what was once Clara's home. Ahead, somewhere beyond the mist, waited the road that would lead them into Nikolai's world and into the kind of danger that would change all their lives forever. They walked for hours through the forest. Rain fell in soft sheets now, the storm easing but not stopping. Clara's boots squelched in the mud. Emma's small hand was icy in hers. Nikolai moved ahead of them, slow but steady, one hand pressed to his bandaged ribs. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the rhythm of footsteps and distant thunder fading into silence. Finally, Emma broke the quiet. "Where are we going?" "To a car," Nikolai said without turning. "I left one hidden near the ridge." "Why?" she asked, curiosity undimmed even after everything. "In case I needed to disappear fast." Emma frowned. "That sounds like something bad people say." Nikolai glanced over his shoulder, rain dripping from his hair. "Sometimes bad people plan better." Clara stopped walking for a moment, pulling Emma close. "Don't talk to her like that." Nikolai faced her fully now, his pale eyes unreadable. "She asked." I answered. "Yeah, well, maybe don't answer like a man who gets shot for a living," Clara snapped. He looked at her for a beat, then gave a faint smile. "Fair enough." They started walking again. The air smelled of wet pine and earth. When they reached the ridge, Nikolai moved a pile of branches to reveal a covered vehicle, an old black SUV with tinted windows and mud-streaked tires. "You hid this out here?" Clara asked, astonished. "I hide a lot of things," he said simply, unlocking it. Inside the car, it smelled faintly of gasoline and gun oil. Emma climbed into the back seat, clutching her damp stuffed fox. Clara slid in beside her, eyes scanning the woods. Nikolai started the engine. "We'll drive north, off the main roads. They won't expect that." Clara crossed her arms. "You act like this is normal." "It is for me." He glanced at her briefly. "You'll get used to it." "I don't want to get used to it," she muttered. They drove for miles without speaking. The forest gave way to open valleys and winding dirt roads. The rain stopped completely by the time they reached the edge of a deserted highway. Emma fell asleep, her head on Clara's lap. Watching her daughter breathe slowly calmed Clara's nerves for the first time since the bridge. Nikolai noticed. "She's brave," he said quietly. "She shouldn't have to be," Clara replied. "She's just a kid." He nodded. "Kids don't stay kids for long in this world." Clara studied him. His profile was sharp in the dim light, strong jaw, bruises shadowing his skin, eyes always scanning the mirrors. She wanted to hate him. He'd brought chaos into her life. But the truth was, she'd brought him home first. "Tell me something," she said suddenly. "You said people want you dead. Why?" He hesitated. "Because I stopped taking orders." "What kind of orders?" "The kind that make you lose your soul." She frowned. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give without making you see me differently." Clara leaned back. "Too late for that." A small smile ghosted across his lips. "You sound like my sister." "You have a sister." "Had." His hands tightened on the wheel. "She was killed years ago. Wrong place, wrong time. After that, I started working for people who promised justice. Turns out, they were just another version of evil." Silence filled the car. Clara didn't press further. Finally, she asked, "What will you do now?" He glanced at her. "Keep you alive." The simplicity of it sent a chill down her spine. Hours later, the SUV pulled off the road near a small cabin tucked between evergreens. Nikolai killed the engine. "We'll rest here until nightfall." Inside, the cabin was small but warm, stocked with blankets, canned food, and bottled water. Clearly another safe house. Clara helped Emma settle on the couch, then turned to Nikolai. "You really have all this ready? Hideouts, cars, food?" He shrugged. "You don't live long in my world without planning ahead." "And what world is that, exactly?" He met her gaze. "One you don't belong in." Clara crossed her arms. "Too late. You dragged me into it." He shook his head. "You dragged yourself in when you cut me loose." She couldn't argue. Instead, she busied herself heating canned soup on a portable stove. The smell filled the small space. Nikolai sat near the window, watching the forest beyond. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes never stopped moving. "Do you ever stop watching for danger?" Clara asked quietly. "No. That's no way to live. It's the only way I know." They ate in silence. When Emma finished, she curled up under a blanket and was asleep within minutes. Nikolai leaned back in his chair. "She trusts you completely." "She's my daughter," Clara said softly. "Then she's lucky." Clara looked at him. "Were you?" He paused. "Once." She wanted to ask more, but exhaustion pulled at her. When she finally lay down beside Emma, Nikolai remained awake by the window, gun resting on the table beside him. Through half-closed eyes, Clara watched him for a moment before drifting off. The last thing she saw was his face illuminated by the moonlight, cold, scarred, and unbearably lonely. When Clara woke, the fire had burned to embers. Morning light spilled through the cracks in the cabin walls. Nikolai was gone. Panic hit instantly. She sat up, scanning the room. Emma was still asleep. The SUV keys were gone. "Nikolai," she called, heart pounding. No answer. She stepped outside, pulling her jacket tight. The air smelled of pine and smoke. Then she saw him near the tree line, kneeling beside a creek, washing blood from his hands. "You shouldn't wander off like that," she said sharply. He didn't look at her. "I needed to clear the traps." "Traps? For anyone who followed us." She frowned. "You think they're still coming?" "I don't think," he said. "I know." She walked closer. "And what happens when they find us?" "Then I finish what I started," he said calmly. "And you keep your daughter alive." The flat certainty in his voice made her stomach twist. "You talk like dying doesn't bother you." "It used to," he said, standing. "Before I ran out of reasons to live." Clara studied him. His eyes, so cold the night before, looked different now, tired, human. "Maybe you just haven't found a new reason yet." He gave her a small, humorless smile. "Maybe." They drove again that afternoon. Hours passed as the forest deepened. Finally, the trees opened to reveal an iron gate flanked by stone pillars. A camera swiveled above it. Nikolai rolled down his window and spoke into a small device in Russian. The gate opened without a sound. "What is this place?" Clara whispered. "Home," he said simply. The road wound through rows of old pine trees before revealing a sprawling house of dark stone and glass. Men with earpieces stood guard at the entrance. They watched as the SUV pulled up, hands subtly resting near their weapons. Clara felt Emma's small hand squeeze hers. "Mom, are we safe?" "I don't know yet," Clara said honestly. When Nikolai stepped out, the men straightened instantly. A tall man with gray-streaked hair approached, his presence commanding. "Vale," the man said, relief mixed with irritation. "You're alive." "Barely," Nikolai replied. "Sergio, this is Clara and her daughter. They saved me." Sergio's sharp eyes flicked over them. "That makes them targets." "I know," Nikolai said. "That's why they're staying here." Sergio frowned. "That's not a good idea." "It's not a discussion," Nikolai said, his tone final. Clara stepped forward, anger replacing fear. "Excuse me? I don't take orders from anyone." Sergio raised an eyebrow. "You already are. You just don't know it yet." Before she could reply, a woman appeared at the door, a graceful, silver-haired figure in her 50s, wearing black slacks and a crisp blouse. "Enough," she said softly, but her voice carried authority. "Bring them inside before the rain starts again." Nikolai nodded. "Rosa runs the house," he explained quietly to Clara. "She'll make sure you're settled." Inside, the mansion was surprisingly warm. The scent of fresh bread and wood smoke replaced the metallic tang of fear. Rosa led them down a hallway lined with paintings and stopped before a set of heavy oak doors. "This will be your room," she said. "There's food, clothing, and a bath. The child can rest." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but exhaustion and confusion won out. "Thank you." When Rosa left, Clara turned to Nikolai. "What now?" He leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "You rest. I need to make sure we weren't followed." And if we were? Then the forest will bury them, he said simply, and disappeared down the hall. Clara bathed Emma, helped her change into clean clothes that Rosa had provided, and tucked her into bed. For the first time in days, the little girl slept peacefully. Clara sat by the window, staring at the dense forest outside. It was quiet, too quiet. She didn't hear Nikolai return until he spoke. You did good today. She turned. He stood in the doorway, cleaner now, wearing a dark shirt and bandaged shoulder. I wasn't trying to impress you, she said. I know, he replied. That's why you did. She folded her arms. You owe me an explanation. Who are these people? What is this place? He walked into the room slowly. This house belongs to what's left of my family. My crew, if you want to call it that. Criminals, she said flatly. He didn't deny it. We used to be part of an organization that operated across Europe and here in the States. I left. They didn't like that. So they tried to kill you. Yes. And now they'll try again because I helped you. Yes, he said again, quietly. That's why you're here. Clara shook her head, pacing. You dragged me into a war I don't understand. You chose to save me, he reminded her. That choice has consequences. She stared at him. Do you even feel guilty? I feel many things, he said softly. Guilt is one of them. Gratitude is another. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For the first time, she noticed the faint tremor in his hand, the tension behind his calm. He wasn't unshakable. He was barely holding himself together. Why did you come back for us? She asked quietly. His eyes softened. Because you didn't leave me to die. I couldn't leave you to live in fear. Clara exhaled slowly. I should hate you for this. You don't. She glared at him. You think you know me? He smiled faintly. I know courage when I see it. Before she could reply, a knock sounded at the door. Sergio entered, expression tight. Perimeter cameras picked up movement, 3 vehicles, unmarked. Nikolai's calm vanished. How long? 10 minutes, maybe less. He turned to Clara. Stay here. Don't open that door for anyone but me. She stepped closer. What's happening? They found us. He left before she could say more. The air filled with tension. Outside, engines roared. Shouts echoed through the forest. Clara pulled Emma's blanket tighter, heart racing. Then came the first gunshot, distant but unmistakable. Emma stirred, confused. Mom. Sure, Clara whispered, pulling her close. It's okay. She could hear voices now, commands shouted in Russian and English. The clash of metal and footsteps. A door slammed somewhere below. Minutes passed like hours. Then the noise faded. Silence returned. The door opened quietly. Nikolai stood there, breathing hard but unhurt. It's over, he said. What happened? They were scouts. We took care of them. Clara's stomach twisted. Took care of them how? He met her eyes without flinching. Permanently. She stared at him, horrified. You just protected you, he interrupted. Don't make me apologize for that. He looked exhausted, blood on his sleeve. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Clara asked quietly, does it ever stop? He looked past her to where Emma slept peacefully. Only when there's something worth stopping for. And as his gaze lingered on them, mother and child, Clara realized he might have just found that reason. 2 days passed inside Nikolai's hidden estate, though to Clara it felt like weeks. Time blurred into a strange rhythm of silence, guarded whispers, and the low hum of security systems that seemed to breathe with the walls. From the window of her suite, Clara could see the world beyond the mansion, an endless stretch of pine forest, cut through by a wide silver river. On the far bank stood a vineyard, rows of green and gold stretching into mist. The beauty of it didn't hide the truth. This was a fortress. Everywhere she looked, men patrolled with quiet discipline. They carried weapons but moved like ghosts. Cameras watched every doorway. Even the soft murmur of Rosa's staff in the kitchen carried tension. Emma didn't seem to mind. She was too busy exploring. That morning, Clara found her sitting at a kitchen counter with Rosa, helping knead dough. Push, Twist, fold, Rosa instructed, smiling faintly. Just like that. Emma's hands were dusted with flour. It's sticky. That means you're doing it right, Rosa said warmly. Clara hesitated in the doorway. I hope she's not bothering you. Rosa looked up, her eyes kind but sharp. Children are never a bother. Fear, on the other hand, is. It makes people do foolish things. Clara frowned. Meaning you shouldn't plan to run. It's safer here than anywhere else. That's debatable, Clara muttered. Rosa wiped her hands and studied her. You saved him. That makes you family here, whether you accept it or not. We protect our own. Before Clara could reply, Nikolai appeared in the hallway. He looked different, rested, clean-shaven, dressed in a dark shirt that made him seem more man than myth. His injured shoulder was still bandaged, but his movements were steady. Rosa, he said, nodding politely. Could you take Emma to the stables later? She's been asking about the horses. Emma's eyes lit up. Really? Horses? Rosa chuckled. Of course, pick cola. As they left, Nikolai turned to Clara. We need to talk. She followed him through a long corridor lined with paintings, scenes of cities she didn't recognize, people she suspected were long dead. The hallway opened into a large glass-walled room overlooking the river. It was both office and command center. Maps covered one wall, screens flickered with camera feeds, and a large oak desk sat in the middle. This doesn't look like a vineyard, Clara said, arms crossed. It's both, he replied. We export wine and information. The vineyard keeps questions away. So what are you really running here, Nikolai? A business? A gang? He met her gaze calmly. A network. Some call it criminal. I call it balance. We take from those who profit from suffering and use it to protect the forgotten. She frowned. That sounds noble when you say it. Because sometimes it is. He gestured for her to sit. You've seen violence. Hospitals, accidents. You know the system doesn't save everyone. I built a place that does, though not always cleanly. Clara sat slowly. And the people trying to kill you? The Syndicate, he said. An international cartel that once controlled everything from weapons to human trafficking. I used to be their weapon. I turned against them. And now they want revenge, she guessed. He nodded once. My betrayal cost them money and power. They don't forgive that. Clara's heart pounded. And Emma and I are now part of that equation. I won't let them touch you. His voice was soft but final. You have my word. She laughed bitterly. Your word doesn't mean much in this world, does it? He didn't react. It means everything in mine. They sat in silence for a moment. Clara's eyes drifted to the maps. Circles and lines marked routes across continents. Each was a thread in the web he'd built, dangerous, precise, unstoppable. How long do you plan to keep us here? She asked. Until it's safe. And when is that? When I can sleep without expecting gunfire, he said. His honesty startled her. For a man of violence, he spoke like someone who wanted peace but didn't know what it looked like anymore. When Clara stood to leave, he stopped her with one question. Do you regret saving me? She turned. His eyes held something unreadable, not arrogance, not threat, but genuine curiosity. No, she said quietly. But I regret what it's done to us. Nikolai gave a slow nod. Then I'll make sure it's worth the cost. Later that afternoon, Clara found herself in the stables with Emma. The air was thick with hay and sunlight. Horses whinnied softly in their stalls. Rosa stood nearby, talking with a young man named Luca, one of Nikolai's guards. He was friendly, gentle-eyed, and the first person since their arrival who didn't make Clara feel like an intruder. Emma was laughing, brushing a chestnut mare's manner. Mom, look. She likes me. Clara smiled. You're a natural. She should be. Nikolai's voice came from behind them. Courage runs in the family. Clara turned, startled. He leaned against the stall door, looking almost at ease. You move quietly, she said. Old habit. You should stop. It's creepy. He smiled faintly. Noted. They watched Emma for a while. She laughed freely, completely unaware of the tension surrounding her. Clara's heart ached at the sight of innocence surviving in a place built on violence. She deserves better than this, Clara murmured. She deserves safety, Nikolai said. Right now, this is the only place I can give her that. For how long? As long as it takes to finish this war. Clara looked at him. And after? He hesitated. After, maybe I'll find a way to live without it. She studied him. You really think you can? His lips curved in a small, sad smile. I'm trying to remember how. The next morning brought sunlight and a fragile sense of calm. Clara woke to the scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. When she entered, she found Nikolai already there, reading from a tablet. He looked impossibly calm for someone who lived in constant danger. I didn't think you slept, she said. I don't sleep much, he replied. Old habits. Military? Worse. He slid a cup toward her. You like coffee, no sugar. She raised an eyebrow. You've been paying attention. I notice details, he said. It's a survival skill. Before she could reply, Sergio entered, expression unreadable. We've got movement near the South Ridge. Could be hunters. Could be more. Nikolai's calm hardened instantly. Double the patrols. Quietly. Sergio nodded and left. Clara watched him. Do you ever relax? Not when I'm breathing. She sighed. That's a miserable way to live. Maybe. But it keeps the people I care about alive. She caught the shift in his tone. And who's that, exactly? He met her eyes. You already know. Before she could react, footsteps sounded in the hall, Emma's cheerful voice echoing. Mom, Rosa said I can help in the kitchen today. Nikolai's expression softened instantly. She's adapting well. Children are good at that, Clara said quietly. Adults, not so much. He smiled faintly. You're adapting too, whether you admit it or not. That afternoon, Rosa led Clara to a small clinic room tucked behind the main hall. Shelves of medical supplies lined the walls, everything from antibiotics to field kits. Elena used to run this, Rosa explained. She's gone now. We could use someone with your skill. Clara blinked. You want me to work here? Not want, Rosa corrected. Need. These men get injured. Hospitals ask questions. Clara hesitated. I'm not helping criminals. Rosa met her eyes. You'd be helping people who bleed like anyone else. Men with families, children, mothers who wait for them. Clara stood in silence for a moment, then exhaled. Fine. But I'm doing it my way. No lies, no blind loyalty. Rosa smiled. That's exactly why Nikolai trusts you. Later, while cleaning instruments, Clara overheard raised voices in the next room. She recognized Nikolai's and Sergio's tones. She shouldn't be here, Sergio was saying. You're thinking with your heart, not your head. She saved my life, Nikolai replied evenly. And now she's a liability. She's not. You don't see it, but she's changing things, Sergio insisted. The men talk. They see her and the kid. They forget what we are. There was a long pause. Then Nikolai's voice, low and dangerous. Maybe that's the point. The silence after that said more than words could. Clara stood frozen, realizing the truth. She wasn't just an inconvenience. She was shifting the balance in a world that wasn't built for softness. That night, the estate was unusually quiet. Clara couldn't sleep. She stepped out onto the balcony outside her room, the forest below whispering in the breeze. She heard a soft click, the sound of a lighter. Nikolai stood at the far end of the terrace, cigarette glowing between his fingers. You don't strike me as a smoker, she said. I'm not, he replied, exhaling smoke. Only when I need to remember I'm still alive. She joined him, leaning against the railing. You ever think about stopping? Not the smoking, the killing. He smiled without humor. Every day. Then why don't you? Because some monsters only understand other monsters. Clara turned toward him. That's an excuse. It's survival, he said quietly. And until this is over, I can't afford to be human. The sadness in his voice cut deeper than the words themselves. She looked up at the stars. You keep saying this war will end. What happens when it does? He was silent for a long time. Then he said, maybe I find out who I am without the blood. Clara met his gaze. Maybe you already started. Their eyes held, the air between them heavy but not uncomfortable. Something unspoken passed there, fragile, dangerous, real. Nikolai finally looked away. You should get some rest. Tomorrow won't be quiet. Why? Because nothing stays quiet for long in my world. He walked away, leaving the faint smell of smoke and steel in his wake. Clara stood alone under the stars, heart pounding with a mix of fear and something she didn't want to name. Behind her, in the shadowed glass of the window, her own reflection stared back, the image of a woman who had saved a dying man and accidentally stepped into his darkness. And she realized, with a clarity that made her shiver, that she wasn't sure she wanted to step back out. The next morning began with the hum of engines in the distance and the smell of rain drifting through open windows. Clara woke early, startled by the noise, only to realize it was training, a row of men running drills on the lawn. Their voices blended with the steady rhythm of boots striking earth. Through the glass, she saw Nikolai among them, dressed in black, his movements smooth and controlled despite the bandage still visible beneath his shirt. He didn't bark orders. He simply moved, and everyone else followed. When he turned toward the house, Clara stepped back from the window, embarrassed to have been caught watching. She told herself it wasn't interest, only wariness. But the way her heart quickened when he entered the room said otherwise. Morning, he said, voice low but warm. You shouldn't be doing that, she said, gesturing to his shoulder. You'll reopen the wound. I heal fast. You're not invincible. He smiled faintly. You keep telling me that. Maybe one day I'll believe it. She crossed her arms. I mean it, Nikolai. You're not going to impress anyone by bleeding all over the grass. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, he said, stepping closer. Just remind the men that I'm still standing. There was no arrogance in his tone, just quiet resolve. And that somehow made it worse, because it reminded Clara that his whole world revolved around survival, not pride. Before she could reply, a small voice called from behind her. Mom! Look what Rosa made me. Emma came running in, holding up a small charm necklace shaped like a tiny silver feather. Rosa followed, smiling gently. A symbol of protection, she said. For good luck. Emma slipped it over her neck. Does it work? Rosa winked. Only if you believe. Nikolai's expression softened. Keep it close, he said to Emma. It might just work better than a bulletproof vest. Emma laughed, not catching the weight behind the words. When Rosa and Emma left to go horseback riding, Clara faced him again. You're making her feel safe. Don't make promises you can't keep. His jaw tightened. I intend to keep this one. How? You can't fight the whole world. I don't need to, he said simply. Just the part that's coming for us. Later that day, Clara walked through the medical wing Rosa had helped her set up. A young man, no older than 20, lay on a cot with a deep gash across his arm, an accident from training, Luca explained. As she cleaned the wound, the boy looked at her nervously. Are you really a real nurse? He asked. Paramedic, she corrected. Close enough. He grinned weakly. Never thought someone like you'd patch up someone like me. She smiled faintly. Trust me, I didn't either. When she finished, she found Nikolai leaning in the doorway, watching her work. What? She asked. Nothing. Just didn't expect you to fit in this easily. I don't fit in, she said. I'm just trying to help. He nodded slowly. That's what fitting in looks like. Clara looked at him, trying to read what lay beneath his calm exterior. You're planning something, aren't you? He didn't answer immediately. Always. Does it involve getting us out of here? His silence told her everything. She sighed. You can't keep us locked away forever. I'm not locking you away, he said quietly. I'm keeping you alive. Clara stepped closer, voice sharp. That's the same thing. The air between them thickened. Nikolai's eyes darkened, his tone low but even. You think this is control? I'm fighting every day to keep this place hidden. To keep you breathing. If that feels like a cage, then I'll take the blame. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Clara exhaled and turned away. You can't protect us from everything. I can try, he said. And until you tell me not to, I will. That night, as the estate settled into quiet, Clara stood outside with a cup of tea. The moonlight shimmered across the river. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out, the only sound in the stillness. Nikolai joined her silently, hands in his pockets. Can't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Too much noise in my head. He looked at her, then out toward the forest. Noise means you care. It's when you stop hearing it that you're in trouble. Clara gave a small, tired laugh. You sound like you've lived a few lives. Maybe more than I should have. He leaned against the railing beside her. The night air was cool, brushing between them. For the first time, she realized how close they stood. You ever think about what you'd be doing if all this hadn't happened? He asked. Probably still running between patients and emergencies, she said. Still tired. Still lonely. You don't seem lonely now. She met his eyes. That's what scares me. He looked away, voice rougher now. You shouldn't trust me, Clara. I know. But you do anyway. She smiled faintly. Maybe I'm bad at following rules. Their eyes met, steady, questioning, searching. The silence stretched until a distant shout from the guards broke it. Nikolai straightened instantly, mask back in place. Inside, he said quietly. Stay with Emma. And just like that, the moment was gone, replaced by the same old danger lurking in the dark. The attack came just before dawn. Clara woke to the sound of alarms blaring through the halls, shrill, mechanical, terrifying. Emma sat up in bed, eyes wide. Mom! Get dressed, now, Clara ordered, her voice trembling as she threw on her jacket. It's okay, baby, just stay close to me. Outside the door, Rosa appeared, pale but composed. This way, she said quickly. Follow me. They ran through the corridors as lights flickered red. Somewhere outside, the crack of gunfire split the air. Where's Nikolai? Clara shouted. Outside, Rosa replied. He's leading the defense. We need to get to the safe room. They turned a corner and burst into a reinforced chamber lined with concrete walls. Rosa entered a code on the keypad, the heavy door sliding shut behind them. Clara clutched Emma, heart hammering. What's happening? Scouts from the Syndicate, Rosa said grimly. Testing the perimeter. They've found us. Emma pressed her face against Clara's shoulder. I'm scared. I know, Clara whispered, stroking her hair. It'll be over soon. But in her heart, she wasn't sure. Through a small security monitor, Clara could see flashes of movement, men in black firing from the tree line, the estate guards returning fire. Then she saw Nikolai, moving like a shadow among them, issuing orders with calm precision. He fought not like a brute, but like someone who had learned to control chaos. Every movement was efficient, deliberate. He was lethal, yes, but also strangely beautiful in the way he refused to yield. Clara couldn't look away. After what felt like an eternity, the gunfire stopped. Rosa pressed a button on the console, murmured into a headset, and listened. Finally, she exhaled. It's over. The door slid open, and Nikolai stood there, streaked with mud and blood, eyes hard but alive. Everyone safe? He asked. Rosa nodded. All accounted for. He turned to Clara. You okay? She nodded shakily. You're hurt. It's nothing. Don't lie to me, she snapped. Sit down. He obeyed without protest as she grabbed her kit from the shelf. There was a deep cut across his shoulder, fresh blood seeping through the bandage from before. She worked quickly, cleaning and stitching, hands trembling. You keep doing this, she muttered. Doing what? Getting shot. He smiled faintly. It's a bad habit. Clara met his eyes. One day, you won't get back up. Then I'll die knowing you tried to stop it. Her breath caught at the quiet sincerity in his tone. She looked down to hide it, focusing on the needle in her hand. When she finished, he reached out, his fingers brushing hers, just a touch, gentle and fleeting. Thank you, he said softly. Clara froze. Don't. Don't what? Don't make this harder than it already is. His voice lowered. What if it already is? She turned to face him. Their faces were inches apart, the tension between them charged and fragile. This can't happen, she whispered. Why not? Because I don't belong in your world. His eyes darkened. Maybe that's exactly why I need you in it. Before she could speak, Rosa entered the room, her timing both a relief and a heartbreak. Patrols are clearing the grounds, she said briskly. No more threats for now. Nikolai stood, his expression shuttered again. Good. Double the night watch. And Rosa, make sure the child gets food and rest. Of course. When Rosa left, Clara crossed her arms. You give orders like breathing. He looked at her quietly. It's the only thing that's ever kept people alive around me. And what about you? He gave a small, hollow laugh. I stopped being part of that equation a long time ago. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. That's not true. He met her gaze, tired, vulnerable for once. You keep saying that like you believe I'm still worth saving. I wouldn't still be here if I didn't. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the air between them humming with something neither dared name. Then, from the hall, Emma's small voice broke the spell. Mom! Clara turned instantly. I'm here, sweetheart. Emma ran into her arms, trembling but smiling weakly. You're okay. I told you I would be. Nikolai watched them, something unreadable flickering in his expression, longing, maybe, or envy. Then he turned away, slipping quietly out of the room. That night, Clara found him outside again, leaning against the terrace railing, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. You shouldn't smoke with fresh stitches, she said softly. He didn't look at her. Old habits die hard. Clara joined him, staring at the moonlit forest below. How many more times can you fight like this before it kills you? He smiled without humor. As many times as it takes. She shook her head. You're impossible. He glanced at her, the faintest hint of amusement in his eyes. And yet you're still here. She sighed, wrapping her arms around herself. Maybe because I'm starting to understand you. And that scares me. You shouldn't. Why not? Because understanding me means getting hurt. She turned to face him, her voice steady. Then maybe I'll take that risk. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might say something real. But instead, he dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. Get some sleep, Clara, he said softly. Tomorrow, everything changes. And as he walked away into the shadows, Clara felt a truth settle deep in her chest, something between dread and hope. Because for the first time, she realized that whatever tomorrow brought, she no longer wanted to face it without him. The morning after the attack, the estate was quieter than usual. Too quiet. The kind of silence that felt less like peace and more like a wound trying to heal. Clara walked the perimeter garden with a mug of coffee she didn't drink. Every sound made her flinch, a snapping twig, the hum of distant generators, even Emma's laughter echoing faintly from the stables. She wanted to believe it was over. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Rosa joined her by the stone path, her steps soft and unhurried. You didn't sleep again. Clara gave a tired half-smile. Was it that obvious? Rosa studied her face. You're waiting for the next storm. I'm waiting for it to end. It never ends, Rosa said quietly. Not for men like him. And not for the people who care about them. Before Clara could answer, shouting erupted near the front gate. 2 guards came running, radios crackling. Movement by the fence. 4 hostiles, armed. Nikolai appeared almost instantly, as if summoned by danger itself. He barked orders in Russian, his calm voice slicing through the chaos. Positions. Lock down the inner gate. Keep them outside the walls. The security screens inside the control room flickered to life. Clara followed him, heart hammering. On the monitor, dark figures emerged from the trees, 4 men dressed in black, moving with military precision. Who are they? She asked. Not Syndicate, Nikolai said. Too small a team. Mercenaries, maybe. Hired guns to test us. Testing us how? To see if we're still standing. The men approached the gate cautiously. Then one of them raised a launcher. Down. Nikolai shouted. The explosion hit like thunder. Shrapnel and smoke filled the air. Clara ducked behind the wall, ears ringing. Outside, gunfire answered from the guards' posts. "Stay here," Nikolai ordered, grabbing his rifle. "You can't go out there," she shouted after him. He didn't look back. "I have to." Rosa caught Clara's arm. "Let him do what he does best. What if he doesn't come back?" Rosa's eyes were steady. "Then you'll have to decide if you'll run, or stay and fight." Minutes stretched into an eternity. Through the smoke, flashes of movement danced across the monitors. Nikolai and his men moved like shadows, circling, flanking, striking with precision. But there were more attackers than they'd thought. The camera caught one man slipping through a breach in the outer wall, heading toward the vineyard. Straight toward the stables. Clara's blood turned cold. "Emma," she whispered. Without thinking, she grabbed a pistol from the table, one she'd never used, and bolted down the corridor. Rosa shouted after her, but Clara didn't stop. Outside, the air smelled of gunpowder and smoke. The world tilted between noise and silence. She ran across the courtyard, her lungs burning, her mind repeating only one thought, Emma. When she reached the stables, she saw movement, a man in black dragging Emma by the arm, his gun raised. "Hey!" Clara screamed. The man turned, startled. She didn't think. She pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the air, echoing off the stone walls. The man stumbled backward, dropping his weapon and falling into the straw. Emma screamed, running to her mother. "Mom!" Clara caught her in trembling arms, breath shuddering. "It's okay, baby. You're okay." Another gunshot exploded behind her. The sound was closer this time, not aimed at her. Nikolai stood at the entrance, his rifle still smoking, eyes blazing. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled both of them close. "You shouldn't have come out here," he said hoarsely. "You shouldn't have left us unprotected," Clara snapped back. He stared at her for a long, charged moment, anger and fear clashing behind his eyes. Then he pulled her and Emma tighter. "You did good," he said quietly. "You kept her safe." Clara looked down at her shaking hands, still holding the pistol. "I shot someone." "He would have shot you first," Nikolai said. "Don't think. Just breathe." When the gunfire outside finally ceased, the courtyard was littered with smoke and debris. The men had driven the mercenaries back. But the price was clear: 1 guard dead, 2 wounded, blood darkening the gravel. Clara spent the next hour in the infirmary, patching wounds with shaking hands. Nikolai worked beside her in silence, wrapping bandages, holding pressure where she directed. When the last patient stabilized, she sank onto a stool, exhausted. "This isn't living," she murmured. "It's surviving." Nikolai leaned against the counter, wiping blood from his arm. "It's both, some days." She looked up at him. "You keep saying that like it's normal. For me, it is. And for Emma." He hesitated. "For her, I'll find something better." She searched his face, trying to see the man beneath the soldier. "Why do you keep fighting, Nikolai? What's left for you?" He looked toward the door where Emma's laughter faintly echoed down the hall. Maybe something worth saving after all. That night, the sky turned clear again. No alarms, no shouts, only the quiet drip of rain from the eaves. Clara sat outside with a blanket around her shoulders. The weight of the day pressed heavy on her chest. She could still see the man she'd shot, still feel the recoil in her hands. Nikolai joined her silently, his movements slow from exhaustion. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he placed something small on the table, her pistol, cleaned and oiled. "You did well," he said softly. She looked at him, voice shaking. "I killed someone." He met her gaze. "You saved your child." Clara swallowed hard. "Does it ever get easier?" He shook his head. "If it does, you've lost too much of yourself." She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, "And you? How much of yourself is left?" He didn't answer. But the way he looked at her said enough. Days passed without another attack, but no one relaxed. The men repaired the gates, reinforced walls, and doubled watch rotations. The estate became a living machine, every part moving in rhythm, fueled by vigilance and fear. Clara found herself drawn deeper into the rhythm. She treated the wounded, trained a few guards to handle emergency care, and even reorganized the medical stockroom. At first, the men were awkward around her. They called her Miss Clara in uncertain tones, unsure how to behave around someone who wasn't part of their world. But when she saved a man from bleeding out after a training accident, something shifted. From then on, they nodded when she passed. Respect. Maybe even trust. That afternoon, Nikolai found her in the infirmary, sleeves rolled up, hands steady as she demonstrated CPR to 3 guards. Push here, she instructed, pressing down firmly on the dummy's chest. Count 30 compressions, then 2 breaths. Don't rush. If the ribs crack, it means you're doing it right. One of the men blinked. You're scary, Miss Clara. She smiled faintly. Good. Maybe you'll remember better next time. Nikolai watched quietly until the lesson ended. When the men left, he said, "You've turned killers into medics." "I've turned them into something human," she said simply. He nodded. "That's harder than you think." Clara wiped her hands on a towel. "Why are you here, Nikolai? You never come down here unless someone's bleeding." "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For making this place feel alive again." She looked at him skeptically. "You don't strike me as sentimental." "I'm not," he admitted. "But I notice when things change." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You could have left when the road was clear last week. Rosa told me she saw you near the cars." "I thought about it," Clara said honestly. "Why didn't you?" "Because Emma trusts you. And because," she hesitated, then met his eyes. "I don't run from people who've risked their lives for me." For the first time in a long while, Nikolai smiled, not his usual guarded smirk, but something real. "Then you're braver than most of the men who work for me." She looked away, cheeks warm. "You say that like it's a compliment." "It is." That evening, a soft rain returned. Clara walked the halls, listening to the rhythm of water against glass. She found Nikolai in the library, sitting by the fire with a glass of dark wine. He looked up when she entered. "You ever drink?" "Only when I've made bad decisions." "Then this should be the perfect time," he said, pouring her a glass. She accepted it, sitting across from him. "You have a strange way of relaxing." "This is relaxing," he said with a faint smile. For a while, they sat in silence, watching the flames. The air between them was calm but charged, the quiet that comes when two people understand each other too well to need words. Finally, Clara broke the stillness. "Rosa said you used to be a doctor." He chuckled softly. "Not exactly. I studied medicine for a year before everything went sideways. My father was killed. I left school to find his killers." "And you did?" He nodded slowly. "But when I found them, I didn't bring them to justice. I became what they were." Clara stared into the fire. "So that's how it started." "That's how it always starts," he said quietly. "You convince yourself it's about justice, until it becomes survival." She looked at him, seeing past the mask. "You could still change, you know. Walk away from this." He met her eyes. "Walk where? Men like me don't get to start over." "Then make something new," she said softly. "You built this place. You could build something better." He studied her for a long time. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said. "But it's possible." The firelight flickered over their faces. Somewhere outside, the rain softened into mist. Nikolai set his glass down, his voice low. "If I tried to change, I'd need a reason strong enough to fight what I've become." "Maybe you've already found one," she said quietly. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he stood, walking to the window. "Go to sleep, Clara. Tomorrow we start again." She rose slowly, pausing at the doorway. "You know," she said, "for someone who claims to be a monster, you save a lot more people than you hurt." He looked back at her with a faint smile. "Maybe I just met someone who reminded me how." That night, Clara lay awake long after the lights went out. The sound of the rain mingled with distant thunder. Somewhere down the hall, she could hear Nikolai's low voice giving quiet orders to the night guards. And for the first time since the bridge, she didn't feel trapped. She felt part of something bigger, something dangerous, yes, but also alive. She knew it was foolish to care for a man like him. But as the thunder faded into silence, she couldn't stop herself from hoping that maybe, just maybe, she was helping him find his way back to being human. The next week passed in tense calm, like the air before a storm. The Syndicate had gone quiet, too quiet, and everyone at the estate knew silence in this world never meant safety. It meant something worse was coming. Clara felt it in every breath. So did Nikolai. He spent long hours locked in his office, his phone filled with hushed calls in foreign languages. When she saw him at meals, his words were shorter, his eyes sharper. He was waiting for something or someone, and that kind of waiting terrified her more than bullets. That evening, Clara found him sitting by the riverbank behind the estate. The water was dark and slow, reflecting the heavy clouds above. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of command, no weapons, no mask of indifference, just a black shirt and silence. "You've been avoiding me," she said softly. He didn't turn around. "I've been trying to protect you." "From what?" "From me." She came closer, folding her arms. "You're not that dangerous to me, Nikolai." His lips curved in a humorless smile. "You have no idea." The river's current whispered around the rocks. For a long while, neither spoke. Then he finally said, "Do you know what I did before you found me?" "I know you worked for bad people," she said. "That's an understatement." He stared at the water, his voice distant. "I was their blade. When they wanted someone gone, I was the last thing that person saw. I told myself I killed for justice, but really, I killed because I didn't know how to stop. Every death made me feel less. Until there was nothing left to lose." Clara's throat tightened. "And then one day, they gave me an order I couldn't follow." He turned toward her. His eyes looked darker than she'd ever seen them. "They told me to kill a child. A boy. He was maybe 8. His father had stolen money from the Syndicate, millions. I broke in that night, and I found the boy asleep in his bed, hugging a stuffed bear." He paused, jaw clenched. "I couldn't do it. I walked away. The next morning, they sent someone else. The boy died anyway. So did his parents. They made sure I saw it happen." Clara covered her mouth, horrified. "Nikolai. That's when I left them. I tried to burn the Syndicate from the inside, expose their accounts, their roots, their names. That's why they're hunting me now." He looked at her, eyes full of quiet pain. "I've killed people who deserved worse, and I've killed people who didn't deserve anything at all. That's the truth you should know before you keep standing beside me." Clara stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady. "And what do you expect me to do with that?" "Walk away," he said softly. "Before I destroy everything you are." But she didn't move. Instead, she reached out, touching the scar that traced his jaw. "You think I don't already know who you are? You think I haven't seen what this world does to people?" He caught her wrist gently, his touch trembling. "You shouldn't have to carry this." "Maybe I want to." The air between them tightened. For the first time, Nikolai looked like a man at war with himself, torn between pushing her away and pulling her close. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said. "I'm not giving it," Clara replied. "I'm giving you a chance." She held his gaze until he looked away, unable to bear it. And in that silence, something fragile but unbreakable took root, not absolution, but understanding. Later that night, rain began to fall again, soft and steady. The kind of rain that blurs the world and hides the things people don't want to see. Clara sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames, when Nikolai entered. He didn't speak at first. Just poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. She took it without a word. "You look like you've been thinking," he said quietly. "About what happens when this all ends," she replied. He sat beside her. "It doesn't end." "Not really." "It has to," she said. "Emma needs a life. So do I." He nodded slowly. "And I need to make sure you get it." Their eyes met again, not like before, full of fear or confusion, but like 2 people standing on the same side of something they could never fully escape. "Tell me the truth," she said. "If I hadn't found you that day on the bridge, would you have died?" "Yes," he said simply. And maybe that would have been easier. She set her glass down hard. Don't say that. You think you were meant to die, but maybe you were meant to be saved. He smiled faintly. By you. By someone who finally saw more in you than a weapon. The words hung in the air like a confession neither of them planned to make. When he finally stood to leave, he said quietly, "You shouldn't care for me, Clara." She looked at him steadily. Too late. 3 days later, the world caught fire again. It started with a coded message intercepted by one of Nikolai's men, a location, coordinates, and a single phrase, "The river bleeds tonight." Nikolai's face went pale when he read it. "They've found the supply route," he said. "The one we use to move medicine and food through the north border." Clara frowned. "Medicine? I thought you smuggled weapons." "I used to," he said. "Now it's things the Syndicate denies to the people they control, food, antibiotics, vaccines. We're not saints, Clara, but we're not monsters either." He looked at her with quiet urgency. "I have to go." Clara stepped forward. "Then I'm going with you." "No." "Yes," she said firmly. "If someone gets hurt, they'll need me. You said it yourself, I'm part of this now." He hesitated. His instinct screamed to protect her, to keep her far away from the kind of night that always ended in blood. But something in her eyes, steady, fearless, silenced him. "Fine," he said finally. "But you stay behind me. Always." They left at dusk, traveling in a convoy of 3 black SUVs. Rain streaked the windshield as the forest roads narrowed, winding toward the river valley. The sky was bruised purple, thunder murmuring in the distance. Emma stayed behind with Rosa. When Clara kissed her goodbye, the girl clung tight. "Promise you'll come back," Emma whispered. "I promise," Clara said, though even she didn't know if it was true. By the time they reached the bridge crossing, smoke was already rising through the trees. The first truck had been ambushed, its tires shredded, its cargo overturned. Nikolai's men moved swiftly, securing the area. Clara knelt beside a wounded guard, pressing gauze to a gunshot wound in his shoulder. "Stay with me," she murmured. "You'll be okay." The man gritted his teeth. They came out of nowhere, masked like ghosts. A burst of gunfire cut through the air. Bullets struck the truck's side, sparking off metal. Nikolai pulled Clara behind cover. "Stay down," he shouted. She crouched beside him, heart pounding. Rain mixed with blood on the pavement. The air smelled of gunpowder and burning rubber. 2 shooters. Nikolai yelled to his team. "Flank right." Clara peeked over the edge just as one of the attackers sprinted toward them, face covered, rifle raised. Before she could react, Nikolai stepped out, disarming him in one brutal motion. The man went down hard. Nikolai stood over him, gun aimed. "Who sent you?" The man spat blood. "Your brother says hello." Nikolai's face went still. "What did you say?" The man grinned through broken teeth. "He said to tell you." The rest of his words were lost as a bullet struck him from behind. Another shooter, hidden in the trees, had silenced him. Clara gasped. "Your brother?" Nikolai turned toward the forest, voice cold as steel. "He's alive." Before she could process that, a second explosion tore through the air. One of the trucks ignited, fire reflecting in Nikolai's eyes like shards of glass. When it was finally over, the bridge was half destroyed. Flames hissed in the rain. The surviving attackers had fled, leaving only smoke and ruin behind. Clara stood beside the wreckage, blood streaking her sleeve from where she'd helped the wounded. Nikolai leaned against the truck, face shadowed, mind far away. "Your brother's alive," she said quietly. "You thought he was dead." He nodded slowly. "We were on opposite sides of a war years ago. He took the Syndicate's offer. I refused. I thought I killed him the night I burned their headquarters. And now he's back." "Now he's back," Nikolai echoed. "And he's not sending soldiers anymore. He's sending messages." Clara placed a hand on his arm. "You don't have to face this alone." "Yes, I do," he said softly. "He won't stop until one of us is dead." The rain grew heavier, washing blood into the river below. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Clara said, "You told me once you don't kill children. What about brothers?" He met her gaze, voice low. Sometimes, family dies long before you bury them. They drove back in silence. The men whispered among themselves, exhausted and grim. When the estate gates closed behind them, the weight of the night settled like smoke that wouldn't fade. Clara went straight to the infirmary, cleaning wounds until her hands ached. When she finally stepped outside, Nikolai was waiting by the door, rain dripping from his hair. "You shouldn't be out here," she said softly. He looked up. "Neither should you. I couldn't sleep." "Me neither." They stood together in the rain, saying nothing for a long time. Then, without warning, he reached for her hand. "I don't know what happens next," he said. "But I can't lose you. Not now." Her pulse quickened. "You won't. You don't understand," he said, voice breaking slightly. "Everything I touch turns to ash. Everything I care about dies. Don't let me care about you." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Too late. Nikolai looked at her, eyes full of things he'd never said. Then, slowly, as if pulled by gravity itself, he kissed her. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't soft. It was real, the kind of kiss that carried years of pain and one fleeting moment of peace. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, rain mingling with tears neither would admit to. "This is a mistake," he murmured. "Probably," she said. "But it's the only thing tonight that feels right." He rested his forehead against hers. "You make me want to live in a world that doesn't exist." "Then we'll make one," she whispered. "Even if it's just for a while." As dawn broke over the estate, smoke still hung in the air. Nikolai watched the horizon from the balcony, hand resting on the railing. He knew what the message meant. His brother was coming. Inside, Clara slept for the first time in days, her daughter curled beside her. For now, they were safe. But deep down, Nikolai knew peace was just the quiet before the next shot fired. And when it came, it wouldn't just test his strength, it would test everything he'd begun to feel again. Morning sunlight crept through the curtains like a reluctant guest. The estate felt strangely calm after the chaos of the bridge, too calm, the kind that pressed on your chest like unspoken danger. Clara woke before Emma. She sat up slowly, the ache in her shoulders reminding her of sleepless nights and fear disguised as strength. The events from the night before played in her mind like a film she couldn't pause: the fire, the gunshots, Nikolai's confession, the kiss. Part of her wanted to pretend it hadn't happened. Another part couldn't stop replaying it. When she stepped into the corridor, the house was already awake. Men moved with silent urgency. Weapons cleaned. Radios checked. Even Rosa's usual calm expression was tense. "What's happening?" Clara asked. Rosa sighed. "He's preparing for war." Clara's heart sank. "Because of his brother?" "Yes," Rosa said softly. The message was more than a threat. It was a declaration. Clara frowned. A declaration of what? That the past never stays buried. In the command room, Nikolai stood over the long table, studying a digital map lit by red dots marking possible Syndicate movements. Sergio and several of the men surrounded him, faces grim. "We've confirmed it," Sergio said. "The Syndicate has reorganized under your brother's name. He's calling himself Valen. Half your old contacts have switched allegiance." Nikolai's expression hardened. Valen always wanted control. Now he has it. He also has resources, Sergio added. Money. Weapons. People who believe he's the future. Nikolai looked at the map. "Then I'll show them the past." Sergio hesitated. "You mean to fight?" "To finish it," Nikolai said. At that moment, Clara appeared in the doorway. "You'll get yourself killed." Everyone turned. Nikolai's expression softened slightly, though his voice stayed firm. "I told you to rest." "I've done enough resting," she said. "What are you planning?" He gestured toward the map. "A strike. We know where his main supply depot is, the old port near the northern docks. If we hit it first, we cripple his network before he gets closer." Clara shook her head. "You're talking about another bloodbath. More bodies. You think that's redemption?" He met her eyes. "No. It's the price of it." The room went silent. Even Sergio looked away. You can't save anyone if you die, Clara said quietly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. This isn't about saving anyone anymore. It's about stopping him from burning down everything I've built, including you and Emma. Her breath caught. Then let me help. No. Why not? Because I can't protect you and fight him at the same time. She stared at him, furious. I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you to let me choose. For a moment, Nikolai looked like he wanted to argue. Then he sighed. Fine. You'll stay here, in the command center. Rosa will keep the escape route ready. If anything goes wrong, I'll do what I have to, she finished. He nodded. Then we understand each other. That evening, as the sun sank behind the pines, the convoy prepared to leave. Engines rumbled low, weapons gleamed under the fading light. Emma stood by the steps, clutching her silver feather necklace. Do you have to go? She asked. Nikolai crouched beside her, his voice gentle. Sometimes grown-ups have to do hard things to keep others safe. Emma frowned. But who keeps you safe? He smiled faintly. Maybe you do. Just by being here. He ruffled her hair, then turned to Clara. Their eyes met, 1,000 things unspoken between them. Promise me, she said. I'll come back, he replied. I don't break promises. He hesitated, then leaned close, his lips brushing her forehead. Take care of her for me. And then he was gone. Hours passed. The estate grew dark and tense, the night air thick with anticipation. Clara sat in the control room beside Rosa, watching the screen that tracked Nikolai's signal. Green dots moved across the map, their convoy, approaching the dockyard. Too quiet, Rosa murmured. I don't like quiet. Clara nodded. Neither do I. On the monitor, a cluster of red lights flared suddenly. Then, chaos. The sounds of shouting, gunfire, static. Clara's heart leapt. What's happening? Rosa grabbed the radio. Nikolai, report. Static. Then Nikolai's voice, breathless and strained. Ambush. They knew we were coming. Pull the secondary team. The line cut off. Rosa. Clara shouted. Rosa slammed her hand on the console. Signals jammed. They've got a hacker. Without thinking, Clara grabbed her med kit. Where are you going? Rosa demanded. To bring him back. You'll get yourself killed. I won't sit here and watch. Rosa saw the fire in her eyes and didn't try to stop her. Take the back car. And Clara. Clara turned at the doorway. Don't let him die for nothing. The drive to the docks was a blur of rain, headlights, and fear. Clara gripped the wheel so tightly her hands hurt. When she reached the port, the air was alive with fire, explosions lighting the sky, black smoke curling upward like screams. Bodies lay scattered among shipping containers. She parked behind a truck and ran, heart pounding. The smell of gunpowder and salt filled her lungs. Nikolai, she shouted. A voice answered from the shadows. Clara, get down. She dropped just as bullets tore through the air above her. Nikolai appeared from behind a container, blood streaking his temple. What the hell are you doing here? He yelled, grabbing her arm. Saving you. I told you to stay. And I told you I don't take orders. Another explosion rocked the ground, throwing them both off balance. Nikolai pulled her behind cover. Lucien betrayed us, he said, panting. He sold our position. Lucien. The loyal lieutenant who'd once argued that Clara's presence was dangerous. It all made sense now. Where is he? Clara asked. Gone. But he won't get far. Before they could move, a figure emerged through the smoke, tall, clean-cut, eerily calm. His face was familiar in a way that made Clara's blood run cold. Nikolai, the man said with a faint smile. You always did like making a mess. Nikolai froze. Valin. His brother. Valin looked almost identical, same sharp jaw, same eyes, but colder. Empty. You could have joined me, little brother. Instead, you chose to bleed for ghosts. You killed children, Nikolai said. There's no side left to join. Valin's smile widened. Always the martyr. Tell me, how many corpses have you stepped over to feel righteous? He raised his gun. But before he could fire, Clara stepped in front of Nikolai. "You'll have to shoot me too." Valen's eyes flicked to her, amused. "So this is the woman who tamed the assassin." He chuckled. "She looks breakable." "Touch her," Nikolai said, voice deadly calm, "and I'll end you." Valen tilted his head. "Big words. Let's see if your aim's still as good as your temper." They fired almost simultaneously. The noise was deafening. Valen's shot grazed Nikolai's shoulder. Nikolai's bullet tore through Valen's leg, dropping him to one knee. Before Nikolai could finish it, Valen tossed a flash grenade. The explosion lit up the night, blinding white. When the smoke cleared, Valen was gone. Clara blinked through tears, coughing. He escaped. Nikolai gritted his teeth. Not for long. She grabbed his arm, holding him still. "You're bleeding again." "I've been bleeding for years." "Not tonight." "Not if I can stop it." She pressed her hands to his wound, ignoring his protests. Around them, the last of his men secured the perimeter. The air reeked of smoke and victory that didn't feel like one. When she finally finished, he whispered, "You shouldn't have come. You'd be dead if I hadn't." He looked at her, exhaustion softening his features. "You saved me again. You should stop making it a habit." Despite the chaos, he smiled. "I'll try." By dawn, they returned to the estate, battered but alive. Sergio met them at the gate, relief etched into his face. "We thought you were dead." "Not yet," Nikolai said. He turned to Clara. "Get some rest. Please." She shook her head. "I'm fine." "You're not," he said gently. "But you will be." As he walked away, she watched him, the man who carried death on his shoulders but somehow still fought to protect life. And she realized she was no longer afraid of his darkness. She was part of it now, and he was part of her. The next few days were filled with rebuilding. The air smelled of dust and oil, the constant buzz of repair drones echoing across the property. But Nikolai wasn't rebuilding for peace. He was preparing for the end. Clara could see it in the way he moved, precise, restless, haunted. Every conversation with Sergio ended in clipped orders, every night spent poring over maps and encrypted files. Finally, she confronted him. "You're planning something again," she said. He didn't deny it. "A final move. We take Valen's bait before he strikes again." "Bait?" "He wants a meeting. A handoff for what he thinks are my files, proof of Syndicate corruption. He thinks I'll bring them personally." Clara frowned. "And will you?" "Yes," he said. "Because he'll come for me himself." "You're walking into a trap." He looked at her. "So are they." Clara stepped closer, frustration and fear battling in her voice. "You can't keep trading blood for peace." "This isn't peace," he said quietly. "It's survival. But maybe after this, there can finally be peace for you and Emma." She shook her head. "Don't talk like you're not coming back." He reached out, fingers brushing her cheek. "Clara, I don't plan to die. But I've learned not to make promises I can't keep." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Then promise me this. Whatever happens, don't lose yourself." He smiled sadly. "That's the one promise I can't make." The meeting was set for midnight in an abandoned factory on the city's edge. Nikolai left with a small team, dressed in black and silence. Clara watched from the surveillance feed, every heartbeat pounding in her ears. The factory's walls were rusted, windows shattered. Rain poured through the broken roof, puddling across the floor. When Valen arrived, he brought twice as many men, all armed, all watching. "Little brother," Valen called out, voice echoing. "Always so predictable." "Predictable enough to bring what you want," Nikolai said, holding up a small metal case. "The Syndicate's accounts. Every dirty transaction." Valen's eyes gleamed. "Hand it over. After you call off your dogs." Valen laughed. "You still think this ends with a deal?" At his signal, his men raised their guns. But before they could fire, the floor beneath them erupted, hidden charges detonating in a flash of light. Nikolai's team moved fast. Bullets cut through smoke, chaos swallowing the room. Clara gripped the edge of the desk, breath ragged as she watched the feed. Come on, Then she saw it, Valen aiming at Nikolai from behind a pillar. Without thinking, she grabbed the radio. "Behind you." Nikolai turned just in time. Valen fired. The bullet grazed his arm. Nikolai fired back, hitting his brother square in the shoulder. Valen fell to the ground, gasping, blood mixing with rainwater. "It didn't have to end this way," Nikolai said, standing over him. Valen laughed weakly. "You think you're free now? There's always another me waiting." Nikolai looked down, then tossed the gun aside. "Maybe. But not today." He turned to his men. "Call the FBI. Give them the files." Sergio stared. "You're surrendering it all?" "Yes," Nikolai said. "Let the system clean its own mess for once." Hours later, when Nikolai returned to the estate, dawn was breaking. Clara was waiting by the steps, soaked from rain. He stopped in front of her, exhausted but alive. "It's over," he said softly. "He's gone." She stared at him. "And what now?" "Now. I start trying to live." She smiled faintly. "You mean for real this time?" "For real," he said, stepping closer. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't desperate. It was quiet, certain, full of all the things they'd survived to reach this moment. Behind them, the first rays of sunlight broke through the mist, touching the estate walls like a promise. The war was over. But their story, the one built from blood, forgiveness, and impossible love, was only just beginning. The day after the ambush, the estate felt almost peaceful. Birds sang in the trees, and the morning sunlight spilled over the river like nothing had happened. Yet underneath that calm, something was wrong, a tension that hummed through the halls like static before a storm. Nikolai stood in the war room, studying the reports from the night before. Valen was dead, his remaining forces scattered, and the files had been turned over to the authorities. By all rights, it should have been the end. But his instincts told him otherwise. Clara entered quietly, still wearing one of his shirts, her hair messy from sleep. "You're up early," she said softly. "Couldn't sleep." "Because of him?" Nikolai shook his head. "Because of what comes after him." He turned the tablet toward her. It showed encrypted messages intercepted overnight, short, sharp bursts of text that made his stomach knot. "They're regrouping," he said. "Some of Valen's lieutenants are forming their own network. Smaller, faster, harder to trace." Clara frowned. "Can't you just stop?" He gave a tired smile. "Stopping isn't something men like me do. We just pause long enough to reload." She stepped closer. "You're not that man anymore." He looked at her for a long time. "Maybe. But the world still thinks I am." Just as he spoke, Sergio entered the room. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharper than usual. "We have company," he said. "Two SUVs on the East Road. No insignia, but they're moving like military." Nikolai stiffened. "How long until they reach us?" 5 minutes. Maybe less." He grabbed his pistol and turned to Clara. "Find Rosa. Get Emma to the cellar. Don't argue." She opened her mouth to protest, but his tone left no space. "Go." Outside, engines roared. Dust and sunlight mixed as the SUVs screeched to a halt at the front gate. Men jumped out, not Syndicate soldiers, but government agents, their vests marked with bold white letters, FBI. The estate guards raised their weapons, waiting for Nikolai's command. But he motioned for them to lower them. "No one fires," he said quietly. "Let them speak first." A tall agent approached, flanked by 2 others. He had that official calm that comes from authority mixed with arrogance. "Nikolai Vale," the man said. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, weapons trafficking, and obstruction of federal investigation." Nikolai raised an eyebrow. "Good morning to you too. We know you handed over the Syndicate files," the agent continued. "But we also know you edited them. You kept something back." Nikolai's eyes narrowed. "And you think I'm going to hand it to you?" The agent smirked. "You're going to hand it to us, or you'll disappear like your brother did." Clara, who had come running back despite Nikolai's orders, froze behind the gatepost. Her heart thudded. Something about the agent's words felt wrong, too personal, too rehearsed. Before Nikolai could respond, Sergio stepped forward. Enough, he said flatly. We're done negotiating with ghosts. He drew his gun. The agents moved instantly, shouting, but it was too late. The first shot cracked through the air. Then chaos exploded. Bullets tore across the courtyard. The guards returned fire. Clara screamed for Emma, who was somewhere inside with Rosa. She dropped behind the fountain as gunfire shredded the stone above her. Nikolai, she cried. He was already moving, his body a blur of instinct, returning fire, pulling her down, shielding her with his own body. The air filled with smoke and dust. Sergio, he shouted. Fall back. But Sergio didn't move. He was walking forward through the haze, his gun raised again, this time, aimed not at the agents, but at Nikolai. Clara's eyes widened. Nikolai, no. Sergio fired. The bullet hit Nikolai in the side, spinning him backward. He stumbled, shock flashing across his face. For a second, everything went silent, the way sound sometimes disappears after an explosion. Then Nikolai fell to one knee, clutching his wound. Blood seeped through his fingers. Clara screamed. Why? She shouted at Sergio. Sergio's expression was calm, even cold. You thought Valen was the only one who wanted power? He was a fool. I'm not. You built an empire, Nikolai. I'm just taking what's left. You were my brother, Nikolai hissed, struggling to stand. I gave you everything. And you made me your shadow, Sergio spat. Always second. Always watching you get what I deserved. Now it's my turn. Before he could shoot again, one of Nikolai's men, young Luca, the one Clara had once stitched up, appeared behind Sergio and fired. Sergio staggered, surprise flickering across his face before he fell backward into the dust. Silence followed, broken only by the distant whir of retreating vehicles. The fake agents had vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. Clara crawled to Nikolai's side, pressing her hands against his wound. Stay with me, she whispered. Don't you dare leave me now. He groaned, gripping her wrist. You shouldn't have stayed. You shouldn't have gotten shot again, she said fiercely, her voice shaking. Luca knelt beside them. We need to move him to the infirmary. Clara nodded. Help me lift him. Hours blurred. Clara worked like a machine, cutting, stitching, stopping blood, refusing to think. Rosa brought water and morphine. The air smelled of antiseptic and iron. When the bleeding finally slowed, Clara sat back, trembling. He'll live, she said, barely believing her own words. Rosa touched her shoulder. You saved him again. Clara shook her head. No. He saved me first. When Nikolai woke later that night, the room was dim. Rain pattered against the window. He turned his head and saw Clara sitting beside the bed, half asleep, her hand resting near his. You never listen, she murmured without opening her eyes. Neither do you, he whispered. She looked at him, tears gathering silently. He was your friend. He was my brother in everything but blood, Nikolai said hoarsely. And I killed him by trusting him. Clara brushed her fingers through his hair. No. He killed himself by choosing greed. He smiled weakly. You always find a way to make things sound like hope. Someone has to. She hesitated, then whispered, I can't lose you again, Nikolai. You won't, he said, voice low. I'm too stubborn for death. But as his eyes closed again, she realized something had shifted. He wasn't just fighting the Syndicate anymore. He was fighting his own ghosts, and losing would mean more than dying. The next morning brought grey skies and silence. The rain hadn't stopped, turning the gardens into silver pools. Inside, the estate felt hollow. Men whispered instead of speaking, as if the walls were listening. Clara checked Nikolai's wound, redressing it carefully. He watched her with quiet intensity. You should rest, she said. I've rested enough, he replied. Valen's gone, Sergio's gone. Now I have to decide what comes next. She frowned. You could leave. Disappear. Start over. He smiled faintly. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is, she said. Maybe peace isn't something you fight for. Maybe it's something you stop running from. He looked at her like he wanted to believe it. And if I don't know how? Then we'll learn together. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing her wrist. You always talk like there's a we. There is, she said softly. Before he could answer, Rosa entered the room. There's someone here to see you, she said. Government agents. The real ones, this time. Nikolai tensed. How many? Just one. She says her name is Agent Monroe. Agent Monroe was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a voice like cold glass. She sat across from Nikolai in the study, flipping through a thin folder. You've made quite a mess, Mr. Vale, she said. But also quite an opportunity. Nikolai raised an eyebrow. That sounds like something only a bureaucrat could say about a war. I'm not a bureaucrat, she replied. I'm here because you gave us something valuable. The Syndicate files. They've already led to several arrests. Clara stood near the door, watching silently. Monroe continued, but there's a problem. You're still a wanted man. Your record doesn't disappear just because you helped us. You have two choices, face prison, or work with us. Work with you? Nikolai asked. As an informant, she said. You know things we can't learn any other way. Help us dismantle what's left of your world, and you'll walk free when it's done. Clara stepped forward. You can't ask him to risk his life again. Monroe glanced at her coolly. You think freedom comes without cost, Ms. Ruiz? Nikolai's expression didn't change. What happens if I refuse? Then we arrest you within the hour, Monroe said simply. Silence stretched. Clara could feel his heartbeat in the air, that constant, restless rhythm of a man caught between two impossible paths. Finally, Nikolai said, give me one night to decide. You have 12 hours, Monroe said, standing. Then I come back with a team. When she left, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. That night, rain poured harder than ever. Clara found Nikolai outside on the terrace again, standing beneath the overhang, watching lightning flash over the trees. You should be in bed, she said. He smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep. Again. You're thinking about her offer. I'm thinking about what happens if I take it, he said. If I help them, I betray everything I once was. But if I don't, he trailed off. You'll lose your freedom, she said softly. He nodded. Maybe that's the price I have to pay. Clara stepped beside him, rain misting against her skin. You've already paid enough. You've lost your brother, your friends, your peace. When does it end, Nikolai? He looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. When I stop deserving punishment. She grabbed his hand. You think saving people doesn't count for something? You think changing doesn't matter? He shook his head. You make me want to believe it does. Thunder rolled in the distance. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Clara said quietly, whatever you decide, I'll be here. You shouldn't be. I will be anyway. Just before dawn, Nikolai made his decision. He walked into the command room, still wearing the same black shirt, and stared at the map that once tracked enemies and escape routes. Then he turned it off. When Clara entered, he said softly, I'm done running. She frowned. What do you mean? I'm taking her deal, he said. Not for them, for you and Emma. If I do this right, you'll both be free to live without looking over your shoulders. Tears welled in her eyes. And what about you? He smiled faintly. Maybe freedom doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. She stepped forward, her voice shaking. Then promise me something. Anything. When it's over, come back to us. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his eyes held real peace. That's a promise I'll try to keep. Hours later, Agent Monroe returned. Nikolai handed her a sealed envelope, the names, the accounts, everything left of his former empire. As she left, she said, you understand this puts you in danger. The people you're exposing will come for you. He smiled slightly. They've been coming for years. When she was gone, Clara approached him. So this is it. For now. She looked at him, memorizing the way he stood, strong, scarred, unbreakable. You'll come back, she said quietly. He reached out, brushing his thumb along her cheek. You saved me, Clara. Twice. Maybe now I can return the favor. He kissed her forehead gently, then turned toward the door. The rain had stopped. The world outside was washed clean, pale light breaking through the clouds. And as Nikolai stepped into that light, Clara realized he wasn't just walking away to pay for his past. He was walking toward the possibility of a future, one that, for the first time, didn't smell of blood and fear, but of something like hope. 6 months later. The city had changed, though not as much as it pretended to. Neon lights still flickered on broken streets. Power still belonged to the shadows. And somewhere among those shadows, a man once known as Nikolai Vale was quietly rewriting his name. The world believed he was dead. The official report said his convoy exploded during a federal operation in the Eastern District, no body recovered. Clara saw the headline 2 months after he left, and the words nearly broke her. But deep down, she knew better. He had promised to come back. Clara now worked as the lead nurse at a private clinic in the city, one she'd helped establish with government funding that mysteriously appeared under anonymous benefactor. The clinic treated everyone, from injured workers to people too afraid to go to hospitals because of who they'd crossed. Sometimes, when she walked through the halls at night, she could almost hear his voice. "You wanted to heal the world, Clara. Maybe this is how you start." Emma was thriving, too. She went to school nearby, her laughter filling the small apartment above the clinic. Yet some nights, Clara found her daughter awake, sitting by the window. "Do you think he's really gone?" Emma would whisper. And Clara, without hesitation, would answer, "No. He's too stubborn for that." One cold evening, Clara was locking up when a man stumbled through the clinic door, bleeding, half-conscious, muttering in Russian. Her heart stopped. For a split second, she thought it was him. The same dark hair, the same build. But when she knelt beside the stranger, she saw his face younger, desperate, terrified. "Who did this to you?" she asked, pressing gauze against the wound. The man's eyes darted around. "They said, his back," he gasped. "The ghost of the bridge. He's hunting them." Clara froze. "Who?" "The Syndicate," the man whispered. "The ones who escaped. He's killing them one by one." And then he passed out. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The name, the ghost of the bridge, kept repeating in her mind. It was what the media had once called Nikolai when he vanished after the Syndicate wars. If the rumor was true, it meant he was alive, and still fighting. She tried to convince herself that it didn't matter, that she should be grateful he was gone, safe from the world that tried to destroy him. But the truth clawed at her chest. She missed him, every breath, every heartbeat. At dawn, she made her choice. Rosa, now the clinic's administrator, saw her packing a small bag. "Where are you going?" she asked quietly. Clara zipped the bag. "To find him." Rosa sighed. "And if he doesn't want to be found?" Clara looked up, her eyes steady. "Then I'll remind him that he promised me he would come back." The trail led her to the outskirts of the old industrial district, the same area where he'd vanished months ago. The streets were empty, lined with rusted factories and burnt-out cars. As she walked, a shadow stepped out from an alley. "Don't move," a voice said. She froze. Then slowly turned. It was him. He looked leaner, harder, his face marked by exhaustion, his jaw lined with stubble. But his eyes were the same. "Nikolai," she whispered. He lowered his gun instantly, disbelief flickering across his face. "Clara." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped forward, tears blurring her vision, and he caught her in his arms. "I thought you were dead," she said, her voice breaking. "I had to be," he whispered against her hair. "It was the only way to finish what I started." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "You promised to come back." "I was going to," he said. "But I couldn't lead them to you." Her anger broke through the relief. "You left me to mourn you." "I left you alive," he said quietly. "There's a difference." He brought her to a hidden warehouse, his new base of operations. Inside were maps, medical kits, and computer terminals displaying names and locations. "This is what's left of the Syndicate," he said. "The fragments. I've been dismantling them one by one." "You're still doing this?" she asked, incredulous. "After everything?" "It's all I know," he said simply. "But I'm close. Once they're gone, I disappear for good." Clara crossed her arms. "And what then?" You keep running until someone finally kills you? He smiled faintly. You always did know how to ruin a plan. You always did know how to make bad ones. They stared at each other, anger fading into something deeper, unspoken, heavy with all the things neither dared say. Finally, he sighed. You shouldn't have come here. Too late, she said softly. I found you. That night, the storm returned. Thunder shook the metal roof. Nikolai worked silently at his desk while Clara patched a wound on his arm from a recent fight. You never did learn to stay out of trouble, she muttered. And you never did learn to stop saving people, he replied. She looked up at him. You could have had peace. I could have, he said, meeting her eyes. But peace isn't real for people like me. Then let me show you what real is, she said quietly. He froze. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand. You still want this? He asked. Even after everything? I never stopped, she said. He kissed her, not desperate this time, but slow, like a man learning how to live again. The storm raged outside, but inside, the world was quiet. Hours later, as lightning flashed through the window, Clara woke to find the bed empty. Nikolai stood by the door, gun in hand, tension carved into his shoulders. What is it? She whispered. They found me, he said. You need to leave. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a choice. The walls shook as explosions echoed outside. The Syndicate had come for him, the final hunt. Clara grabbed her bag. Then we end it together. He looked at her, 1,000 protests dying on his tongue. Stay behind me, he said finally. Gunfire erupted as the doors burst open. Men in black stormed in. Nikolai moved like a ghost, silent, deadly, precise. Clara ducked behind crates, returning fire when one of the attackers got too close. The air filled with smoke and heat. One grenade detonated near the wall, sending shards of glass and fire through the room. Clara! Nikolai shouted. She was on the ground, dazed, a cut across her cheek. He reached her in seconds, dragging her behind cover. You okay? Just angry, she gasped. He smirked. Good. Stay angry. They fought side by side until the last echo of gunfire faded. When it did, the warehouse was half in ruins, smoke curling up from burning crates. Nikolai knelt beside one of the fallen attackers. He was Syndicate leadership, he muttered. They sent their last. Clara placed a trembling hand on his arm. Then it's over. He nodded slowly. It's over. But as he turned, pain crossed his face, he'd been hit. A bullet lodged deep in his side. Clara's breath caught. Nikolai. I'm fine, he said, but his legs gave out. She caught him before he hit the ground, pressing her hands against the wound. Don't you dare die on me. He smiled faintly. You said that the first time we met. And I meant it then, too. He coughed, blood staining his shirt. If I don't make it. No, she snapped. Don't say that. He reached up, brushing her cheek with his fingers. Then promise me something. Promise me you'll live. Tears spilled down her face. Only if you do. He laughed weakly. You drive a hard bargain. Sirens wailed in the distance. The authorities, or what was left of them, were coming. Clara pressed harder on the wound, whispering, hold on. Please, hold on. Nikolai woke to sunlight. For a long moment, he thought he was dead. The air smelled of disinfectant and something sweet, lavender. He turned his head and saw her sitting beside the bed, hand wrapped around his. You're awake, Clara said softly. He blinked. Where are we? The clinic, she said. You've been out for 3 days. And the Syndicate? Gone, she said. You finished it. He exhaled slowly, staring at the ceiling. So it's really over. For them, yes, she said. For you, that's up to you. He looked at her hand still holding his. And for us. She smiled faintly. That's up to you, too. Weeks passed. Nikolai healed, slower than he'd like, but with purpose. He helped repair the clinic, trained the new guards, even began teaching first aid to the younger volunteers. The world no longer knew him as a killer, only as a quiet man who'd once been saved by a nurse under a bridge. One afternoon, Clara found him standing by the river near the old ruins of that bridge. The same spot where everything began. "You shouldn't be walking this far yet," she said. "I had to see it," he replied. "The place where I stopped dying." She stood beside him. The river flowed beneath, clear and calm. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. Every terrible choice led me here. To you." She smiled. "That's dangerously close to romantic." "I'm learning," he said. They stood in silence, the wind brushing through the trees. "I've been thinking," Nikolai said after a moment. "The clinic, it could be more. A safe house. For people trying to leave that world behind." Clara looked at him. "You mean, like redemption?" He nodded. "Maybe it's time I build something that doesn't destroy." She reached for his hand. "Then we'll build it together." That evening, Emma ran through the courtyard, laughing as Nikolai tried to fix a lantern that refused to stay lit. She called him Nick now, as if shortening the name made it less haunted. For the first time in years, laughter filled the air instead of gunfire. When the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara watched him, the way he smiled, the way his scars caught the light, the way peace finally seemed to sit on his shoulders without crushing him. He walked to her, wiping oil from his hands. "You're staring." "Just making sure you're real," she said. He chuckled softly. "I'm still here. For as long as you'll have me." She stepped closer, resting her head against his chest. "Then maybe forever." Later that night, when the lanterns flickered to life, Nikolai sat outside alone for a while, watching the river shimmer under the moonlight. The world was still broken. There would always be shadows. But for once, he didn't feel like one of them. He thought of all the people who'd died, all the blood he couldn't wash away, and then he thought of her, and how she'd found him tied beneath a bridge, bleeding and half alive, and decided he was worth saving. Maybe, he thought, redemption didn't come from saints or prayers. Maybe it came from stubborn nurses and the quiet grace of second chances. Behind him, Clara's voice broke the silence. "Come inside. It's getting cold." He turned, smiling. "In a minute." She laughed softly and disappeared into the light. Nikolai looked at the river one last time, the same river that had nearly swallowed him, the same one that had given him back his life. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Not a ghost anymore." And with that, he followed her home. And that is where the story of Nikolai and Clara finally comes to rest. From the shadows of crime to the quiet light of redemption, it's been a journey through blood, love, and the impossible will to survive. But tell me this, do you really think stories like theirs ever truly end? The world they left behind still breathes in the dark, and some ghosts don't stay buried for long. If this story pulled you in, made your heart race, or left you wondering what happens next, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next tale I bring to life. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Clara's place? And should Nikolai's world stay buried? Or should we open the next chapter together? Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for being part of this story. Until the next one, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, even in the darkest places, someone is always worth saving.